Welcome into the Skinny Podcast. It's the weekly potpourri edition. I'm Richard Skinner, Local12.com digital sports columnist and editor with Rick Boring. As always, it's presented by Blake, the attorney Maislin. We got some NFL and Bengals to talk about, some college basketball to talk about, some college football to talk about. We've got a gambling segment, and then my favorite segment of the podcast where you can hit up the Xverse, hit up the hashtag AskSkinnyAnything, where you ask me questions. I answer them. They do not have to be sports related. In fact, we prefer if they're not, but if they are, we'll answer them as well. And Rick, this time of year, we always got a lot going on.
Yeah, usually this time of year, Skinny, the last few years at least, it's been an exciting time because you get the Bengals coming down the stretch. They're fighting for the playoffs, usually doing well around this time. And it's combining with, on the weekends, you've got college basketball ramping up, and it becomes a great time of year for sports fans in this area. Well, this year, you're just going to have to turn the page because the Bengals dropped another one. They fall to 4-7 after their most recent debacle on Sunday night against the Chargers in a 34-27 loss. You and Mike Petraglia did the post-game podcast where you talked about all the plays and takeaways from that. So we'll go a little bit more big picture, some of the fallout since that game on this podcast. And we'll start with, what did you think of Jamar Chase's comments after the loss, specifically the ones that seemed to be directed at Zac Taylor?
Yeah, I do think this. I think emotions certainly run high when you're struggling like this and you think you're a good football team and you believe you're better than your record. And Jamar is an emotional guy. Most diva wide receivers are. That being said, I thought Zach kind of clapped back at him a little bit yesterday where he said, and I'm paraphrasing, that we put him in position to lead the league in just about every category. So if Jamar's clamoring for the ball more, I think they've given him plenty of opportunities. The stats don't lie in that regard. And let's not forget, he and Joe Burrow were just a tick off on a deep touchdown pass at a key time in the game. I don't think that's anybody's fault. They called a play. Jamar ran the play. Joe threw the ball. They were just a tick off. So I don't know if that's Zach's fault, to be honest with you. But again, I think emotions run high. It's worth, obviously, for us in the media to print those things because it does generate conversation. It is factual. He said what he said. No, he was not misquoted by any stretch of the imagination. But, yeah, I sometimes roll my eyes at that of okay, that's just a player being a player after a game, after a raw loss. I fully understand it.
Normally, I would feel much more that way. That's like, why are you even making a big deal out of this? Is a pretty nothing comment. It's, like you said, guy is fired up after a loss. He's just shooting from the hip a little bit. But as soon as I heard these comments, I immediately flashed back to that day in training camp where Zac Taylor had told all you guys the day before, yep, Jamar's going to be practicing tomorrow. He's back. He's good to go. He's with us again. And then he shows up midway through practice, strolling in street clothes and not practicing, making a big scene, essentially throwing Zach under the bus, making him look foolish in front of all the media types that had been asking about it every single day. It was the biggest storyline of training camp. It felt like a direct slap in the face, F you to the head coach. Now looking back at that, hearing these comments now, you have to wonder if there's just an overall lack of respect for Zac Taylor from Jamar Chase.
Yeah, I think probably more Jamar towards the entire organization, but maybe there is. I don't sense that. I really don't. Again, Jamar likes to talk, and that's okay. I think he was kind of flying from the hip a little bit. That and maybe it's not. Maybe there's a terrible relationship there. If there is, we're going to find that out here in the next few weeks. One more loss. If you come out of the bye, lose to Pittsburgh, I think then you're going to have a lot of finger pointing going. I mean, you're on that cusp right now of that, right? You lose this next game to Pittsburgh out of the bye where, there's still a belief that you can make a run because the schedule is what the schedule is down the stretch, and you've played good teams close, and you just can't find a way to win, and maybe that evens itself out. But yeah, I will say I think they are one more close loss away from either fingers being pointed in every direction and then guys making business decisions after that.
Just to be clear, are you saying there's a belief in that locker room, or do you agree with that? Do you think there's actually a chance this team is still alive?
I do. I think the team is very alive. I mean, you beat Pittsburgh, you're going to be honestly, I think I think they're going to be favored in the Pittsburgh game because it's a home game, to be honest with you. You're going to be favored in the next probably 5 games.
Wow. I was not expecting that. I thought this was going to be the post-mortem report on the season. So you're still saying there's a chance. I just can't. I guess the thought is how could anyone believe that this team will pull together that many wins in a row?
It's a fair point. Listen, I get anybody who believes that. I don't discount that portion of it. Again, they could come out of this bye week and get smacked by Pittsburgh. If they do, then okay, then we've got some real issues that are going to run deeper than just finishing out this season. I think we talked about this last week. I think there are issues beyond this season that are going to probably prevent this team from making the playoffs in the next few years. I do still think this season itself on the level is still salvageable.
I felt that way up until this game. This one, I'd say the hope is gone, at least from my viewpoint. CBS had a column out that was NFL coaching hot seat rankings.
Yeah, I saw it. That guy's a clown.
Doug Peterson from the Jags is number 1. Matt Eberflus from the Bears is number 2. Mike McCarthy from the Cowboys, number 3. Zac Taylor from the Bengals is number 4, Skinny. His comment was, Taylor will likely get another opportunity to coach in the league, but his run in Cincinnati appears to be over. How accurate do you think that is?
I don't. I just don't. I think, listen, if this season goes sideways or, they don't make the playoffs or whatever, I do think there's going to be moves made. I can see Lou Anarumo being shown the door. I can see a couple position coaches being shown the door. It's not Mike Brown's nature. I mean, listen, the leash for Marvin Lewis was how long, Rick? How long? I mean, listen, he should have been shown the door in 2000, whatever that was, 11, right? And then they had the great reboot, and it proved to be right because they made the playoffs 5 years in a row. I mean, for a guy to take you to a Super Bowl and an AFC championship game in back-to-back years and then 2 years later be fired, I don't know if I'm buying that, man.
I'm with you, but it does seem like that sentiment is growing. Certainly from an outside perspective, certainly from the fan base's point of view.
Well, sure.
Around the league, it seems to be, from a national perspective, it seems to be growing too. The problem is, I don't think the Bengals front office has ever operated by public opinion or what the outsiders think.
Correct. And yeah, I do you not know, I guess I'd ask this guy, do you not know how this organization works? I just don't see it. I mean, honestly, if Duke Tobin still has a job after this year, then Zac Taylor's going to have a job after this year.
I think most people would argue Duke Tobin probably should not have his job.
I agree with you.
Year, yeah.
He's the one who should probably go. He's the one who's constructed these awful rosters. So if anybody should go, he's the one that should go.
Yeah,
and
I agree with that.
And I don't think he's going.
Yeah, I mean, let's stay on this topic just for a second because it's what most people are talking about this week, given the nature of this season. How attractive of a job do you think this is if you were to move on from Zac Taylor? Do you think the Bengals would be able to attract top options? Because one of the things that I always caution people against is be careful what you wish for, man.
Right,
to your point,
right.
Zac Taylor did take you to an AFC championship. He did take you to a Super Bowl appearance. And maybe that was just Joe Burrow. Maybe it was just blind luck of things coming together at the right time for him. But we've already seen what this franchise can look like for decades at a time when you don't have the right people in place. So I would open it up to that. Where do you think they would go if they didn't have Zac Taylor? Could they actually get someone better than him?
I don't know. Because here's the thing. The attraction of Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase is something, right?
You would think.
But they've got a lot of holes to fill on the defense, on the offensive line. I'm telling you, man, the next few years, you better hope that the Miles Murphys and the Cam Taylor Britts and the Jordan Battles and the Cordell Volsons, and you better hope they get better. I mean, that's literally where we're at with this thing. You better hope that they get better, and then you better hope you hit on the next few drafts. I don't have high hope for that.
I still think the allure of coaching Joe Burrow in his prime, and if you still have Jamar Chase too, add him into that mix, is a lot for any head coach looking to get their career going. They would be excited about taking on that challenge. But Skinny, the bigger concern I have is how on earth did the Bengals just undo over a decade's worth, probably more than that, of building up goodwill and trying to rid their franchise's name of all the stink that came with it, of them being cheap, of them not operating like other NFL teams, of them not doing things the right way and always cutting corners? How did they undo all of that in a matter of 6 months here, dating back to training camp until now? We're already back in the point where across the league and nationally, people are making fun of the Bengals for being cheap, for not handling their players right, not taking care of them, not doing what they need to do in free agency. And now all of a sudden you're seeing these videos from podcasts with former players, TJ Hushmansada, Andrew Whitworth. Guys are talking about some of the instances that they ran into with the Bengals and with Mike Brown. And now all of a sudden that sentiment is back out there that the Bengals are cheap. They don't do things the right way. I'm just wondering, is that going to hurt them once again, where people aren't going to want to come here because they're like, you don't want to be in that organization?
Yeah, no, I fully understand that sentiment. It's almost like the 3 times they've gone to the Super Bowl, they went, we're good. 81 and 82 were great. They had a great team in 82. Unfortunately, the strike happened, and all of a sudden the roster went south for a handful of years. 88 was the Super Bowl team, and then they never quite matched that after that. And then within a handful of years later became the disaster of the rest of the 90s, right? And I think that, it feels like they've just gotten lucky in a couple of windows, and otherwise it is business as usual. And I think that's the unfortunate part to this. And it is Mike Brown not being willing to make tough decisions like firing people. I mean, honestly, I honestly mean this. I don't like to see anybody get fired, but how does Duke Tobin have a job after this year? How does he still have a job?
No, I mean, and you could have made that argument probably prior to this year, but in a Bengals organization where they've had such little success, it was easy to say, well, look at what these guys just did a couple years ago. They've got the franchise in a good spot, comparatively speaking. But I mean, there's been signs for the last few years that things were not trending in the right direction, especially when it comes to putting this roster together and drafting. And now they're paying the price for that.
It kind of reminds me of the Reds paying for Joey Votto and then saying, hey, we're good. We're good. We got our guy. We got our one guy.
Yeah.
And that's what the national narrative right now is. Oh, the Bengals have 3 stars. One leads the league in sacks. One leads the league in passing. One leads the league. How are they 4-7? They're 4-7 because you don't play with 3 players.
Yeah, it's a total team game. And that's why we've been talking about all year when we've been talking about the receivers and do you pay Jamar and T. Higgins? And to your point, you've been on this since before the season started. It's not enough. You need an entire team. And if you're going to pay all that money to 2 receivers and then have nothing left over for defensive linemen that are going to put pressure on the quarterback, offensive linemen that are going to protect your quarterback, the secondary on the defensive side, all the holes that you have in this team, then it's not going to be enough. And I think we've seen that play out clear as day this season.
And that's where I'm all for paying those guys. But I'm all for paying those guys if you hit on your other draft picks, that you had guys on rookie contracts that are producing and you just don't. And so you can't pay everybody, unfortunately, and you've got a lot of holes to fill. I mean, a lot of holes to fill.
Some of the names that have been thrown about as kind of like the top maybe coordinators that would be up for a head coaching job this year. Obviously, one guy who's sitting out and not coaching anyone, who's a former head coach with a lot of pedigree, Bill Belichick. You've got Ben Johnson, the Lions offensive coordinator. Joe Brady, the Bills offensive coordinator, is a guy that people bring up a lot because he was the offensive coordinator at LSU with Joe and Jamar. Do any of those names do anything for you? Or are there any other names out there?
Yeah, Ben Johnson, obviously, with what he's doing in Detroit is fun. I mean, they can throw it. They can throw it deep. They can throw it short. They can run it. They can run it with 2 different guys. I mean, they're putting 40 points on everybody and sometimes 50 points on teams. I mean, he turned down the carrot. He had a chance to be the Washington head coach and didn't take it. And Dan Quinn fell into a nice spot. I mean, I think he'd be fun and the offense would be fun. But I mean, this offense as it is still averaging 28 points a game. So I think he'd be fun from an offensive perspective. But the defense is a mess personnel wise. It is a mess personnel wise. You need to remake the safety room. You're hoping to God Dax Hill can come back and play corner on a surgically repaired knee. Guys have done it. It's not impossible, but that's one of your hopes. I don't know. Is Cam Taylor-Britt going to be able to bounce back from this ever, or is this what he's unfortunately going to be? And now you got, DJ Turner's going to come off of a broken collarbone. You can certainly play after that and play fine. And I thought he had a really good game the other night. You're about to the point where you need to remake your linebacker spot. You haven't hit on any of your defensive line draft picks. And yes, the jury's still out on McKinley Jackson and Chris Jenkins. I fully understand that. But Miles Murphy hasn't done much so far, unfortunately. And I was kind of bullish on him going into the season. I know he started it hurt, but at some point, you've got to hit on some of these guys. And we're not talking, hey, listen, I don't need Andre Yoshivach to be a guy, right? I mean, it's a 6th-round pick. If he hits, good. I need 1st and 2nd round guys to play. I need Jackson Carman to be starting on this offensive line.
Yeah. Ben Johnson is one of those names that I brought up because everyone is on the same page as you. It's exciting. It'd be fun. Everyone wants him, but he's been selective
Yes.
with taking a head coaching job. And he's the type of guy that I wonder, would he be attracted to coming to Cincinnati and coaching the Bengals if you were to get rid of Zac Taylor? Because if you can get a guy like that, then the whole idea of let's move on from Zac Taylor becomes more interesting to me. I just don't know that the Bengals would be trying to attract that type of talent or that they'd be able to. And that's what concerns me, I think.
Yeah. I mean, it's a fair point. Yeah, I'm back at the stage where I don't trust anything this organization does anymore. They bought my trust a little bit, but that trust is long gone again.
Yeah, I think that's fair. All right, just from taking it forward standpoint, what's next? What's the focus for this team as they head into this bye week and then get back to action?
Yeah, I mean, come back on Monday refreshed and ready to roll. I mean, you've got basically playoff games from here on out that you have to play. I mean, every game is literally matters now, and let's see how this team responds to it. The thing is, it doesn't feel like it's far away because of how well it's played against good teams. But again, you've lost. You're 1-6 now against teams above 500. I take back 0-6 against teams above 500. 1-5 in one possession games. At some point, that's what you are. It's not one game you lose close to a good team. Okay, that's maybe bad luck. But when it starts piling up time and time again, maybe you're just not good enough. Now that being said, I got to give the Steelers all the credit in the world, but I also don't think they're elite. I just don't. I think their defense is, but I think they're a beatable team. And then you've got sub 500 Dallas, which is a complete train wreck mess. Sub 500 Tennessee, which is a complete train wreck mess. Sub 500 Cleveland, which is not as big of a train wreck mess as it was, but still a big mess. And then you've got Denver coming here. And again, these are all winnable games, in my opinion. You could rattle off 5 wins. You're going to be favored, in my opinion, in the next 5 games. It's up to you to go get it done.
Sure, you could stop watching now, but let's be honest, you want to see more. So click some of those links, or better yet, go ahead and tap subscribe. That way you'll catch more content from Local 12.